Well, meet Coach Darin over here, Darin Myers with TAB CSRA, and I'm Neil Gordon with Augusta Business Daily. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on, and we're so excited that we're going to do coaching for people and help them navigate through things going on at work and with their companies and such. And the topic of today's is it's not my job, and we're going to talk a little bit about accountability. But before we get started, we should backtrack a little bit. Tell us the last 30 years of your life. Tell us a little bit about what you did.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And you're right. The last 30 years, I've been in the nuclear power industry, electric power industry. Prior to that, I was a Navy submariner for 7 years, but I will just say largely commercial nuclear power. Led large organizations, probably up to 1,000 people. Capital and operating budgets of exceeding into the hundreds of millions of dollars, and been doing a large part of that. Before I retired out of the industry, I was the plant manager and a site VP at a fairly large nuclear power plant that employed a lot of people.
Absolutely. And, we can mention that you work with the Southern Company and you work with Plant Vogtle. Now, which of the Plant Vogtle operations?
I was on Vogtle 1 and 2, which was the operating units.
Okay.
And they were the one making cash at this point.
Okay, so then you weren't the one with...
I wasn't with
There's
3
been
and 4.
delays here, but...
Yeah, I don't know much about that, and frankly, rather not talk about that.
Not. So as you transitioned out, what I find fascinating about you coaching others is that you've rolled up the sleeves and you're in not only one business, but two businesses.
Right. Well, when I left, I had the opportunity to maybe go play nuclear power somewhere else in the country, and just loved the area that we were living in, and made the family decision really to stay put here in Augusta in the Aiken area. And my daughter, who has been in home healthcare or in healthcare for a large part of her life, COVID came along, and we really made a decision and came to an intersection in life where we decided to do business together. And so I'm having the opportunity to run a business with my daughter now. And secondly, been doing some coaching and consulting and peer advisory boards with the alternative boards, TAB for short, and really getting a lot out of that as well. So,
Sure.
Yeah, maybe slightly definition of insanity starting two businesses at the same time, but things are going well.
But you can empathize with others that are part of your TAB group, which is great.
Absolutely. In fact, I would tell you what I've learned quickly. My whole career has been large corporations and large teams, but as I engage and interact with within my own company, which clearly at this point is small, or with businesses that I have on my boards in TAB, there's a lot of similarity. I mean, a lot. And I would tell you more than half of it comes down to people.
Sure.
And it seems like that's what we talk a lot about in the boards.
Absolutely. And we're continuing to chat with Darin Myers, and tabcsra.com is the website. Darin mentioned working with his daughter, and future podcasts, we're even going to delve into the layers of family issues and also successes, the joys and challenges of working with family members. But today, we really want to focus on accountability. And you often hear, and I cringe whenever I work like a television news station, where a reporter was asked to go carry the tripod and help and take a little bit of video. That's not my job. How do you feel about that statement?
Well, I've heard that 1,000 times myself. And, at the plant, I learned that, leadership, teamwork, culture, employee development and engagement, all very important. But I would put accountability of performance with the team right there with all those important attributes as well. I won't prioritize them, but I could argue, frankly, that having an organization of accountability, good accountability culture would be something I would consider very important. And I've learned that the accountability can be of your own performance. When you think of accountability, I think a lot of people think of it as in terms of punitive. Hey, I'm going to hold you accountable. Mm-hmm. That's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, are you accountable for your performance and taking enough ownership that you're accountable for your own team's performance? And so the comment of "it's not my job" should really stand out as that's frankly not what you want to hear if you're striving to have an accountability culture. I think it's extremely important. It's a huge force multiplier that if you have 800 employees and you only have 30 people being accountable, saying "it's not my job," you're not getting the most out of your assets that you possibly can. So I would just tell the listeners and business owners, small or large, how important having an accountability culture is and having that team performance.
And doesn't that even start at home? I mean, if you think about the tasks that we have to do, the kids with chores and the husbands and the wives, I know it's ingrained in me.
Yeah.
Mondays and Thursdays is when the trash gets picked up.
Yeah. Well, I think you use that because you've heard me give that speech before. But I think when I talk to people about accountability, I always got a kick out of the fact that they didn't think I was talking to them. I was talking to the person to the left or the right of them.
Yeah.
It wasn't them, but they were certainly, go get them, Darin. You're spot on. That person to the left or right of me really needs to step up on their ownership. But I think it applies at home as well. And I think the analogy that I've used is the trash can analogy, that if the trash can is overfloweth in the kitchen and you have a family of 5, what could it possibly be that you may hear if you ask someone to take out the trash? And I would tell you one of the ones that you probably was, "it's not my job."
Sure.
Not my job. Or you may hear, "well, I did it last time."
Yeah.
Right? And, to me, that's a warning sign that, hey, you're not necessarily you're owning the trash for the family as much as you maybe should.
My favorite is, "I'll do it in the morning."
Right.
Because really, what our boss and what our spouse wants is to ensure that it is done properly early enough so that there's no possible mistake.
Right. That's right. There's 2 things, I like to tell people I ask, how's your team or your organization when it comes to accountability? And often I think people give their teams high marks, but when I start asking them questions, I think slowly over time their grade goes down on their own team. So not my job, how often you hear "it's not my job," I think is a really good indicator of just how accountable your team and your team players may be. Here's another one. Be on the lookout for they. Who's they? Well, I'll tell you who they is. If you're in the maintenance department, it's the engineering department. If you're in management, it's the union. If you're in the union, it's the management. If you're at home, it's your sister, your brother, or your mom or your dad.
Right.
So to me, very easily, 2 active signals of accountability is be on the lookout for "it's not my job" or the infamous "they." Because I'm not sure who "they" is. I do know this: they isn't me. Right? They's not me.
This sounds like a who's on. What's the baseball?
Yeah, Laurel and Hardy. Who's
on first?
Right. Yeah. Or what? I think.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm just wondering, for business owners watching this, any telltale signs that on the positive side that you feel an applicant could be self-disciplined enough to own their role and make people around them better?
Right. Yeah, one other thing before we go on,
Yeah.
the passive, "it's not my job" and "they" is easy to detect. What's harder to detect is "I didn't see it," or "I didn't see that," right? So let's go back to your trash can analogy. If you do pinpoint your son or your daughter and say, "hey, do you see the trash?" They could have seen it, but there's a good cop out. "Well, I didn't see it."
Yeah.
And that's much harder to detect. I'm going to say that lack of accountability from a passive standpoint. So you certainly probably many organizations, family units, small or large, will have that lack of accountability on a more passive front, and that's extremely hard to detect.
Oh yeah, and I think I may have answered my own question because just full disclosure, I'm part of Darin's first board, and just we're gonna share things over the next several weeks and months, and I really look forward to it, and I really enjoy it. But I remember about the first thing you did was you had me take a bit of a diagnostic test to determine who I am as a person and how I make decisions. And I wonder if that's a first step in determining whether someone takes responsibility for things.
Right. Well, I think any kind, there's certainly, I suspect, good organizations that have strong accountability. Yeah. They're fortunate. But I do think there's a lot of organizations out there that, one, maybe don't really know their weaknesses. And I wanted to point out the accountability piece because I got to tell you, it's just as I said earlier, a huge force multiplier when you have all people in your organization taking ownership of not only their performance, but equally important, their group's performance, their overall company's performance. Pick marketing. What if you happen to be a technician that's in the shop? How often would you hear from them about the website?
Right.
I mean, to me, technician coming into the front office on Monday morning and going, man, I just happened to be playing on my computer this week and I went past our website. Boy, that seems outdated. I mean, how easy would it be for the technician to say, not my job. I'm just going to go back and do my job back in the shop, and that website stuff is not a part of my job description.
They,
yeah, right. So it's all over the place, and it doesn't come easy. But my experience is once you do really get that culture of accountability, it is phenomenal on how well your team can do when you have all cylinders hitting, if you will, and it's very enjoyable to be a part of something like that. But it takes time.
It does take time, and over the course of time, in the next several weeks and months, we're going to look at a lot of different aspects. And up next for us will be skill or will.
Yeah, I talked about the categories of organizations, and I think employee development and engagement, but certainly when it comes to training, is something that I'm pretty got a lot of experience on and a strong advocate. But certainly there's some things we need to talk about. So I'm looking forward to skill or will.
For more information and to maybe read up on some blogs and some good tips for you and your company, you can certainly go to tabcsra.com. He is Darin Myers. Darin, thanks so much for the time.
Neil, I really appreciate you having me. Thanks.